Welcome to Cut the Bull, an insightful podcast which addresses the news of the day and the cultural issues plaguing our society, bringing logic and context to these topics and discussing solutions too real for mainstream pundits. Now, here are your hosts, Charles Love, Shamika Michelle, and Wilfred Riley.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Bull. I am Charles Love alongside my co-hosts Shamika Michelle and Wilfred Riley. And our guest this week is Jonathan Isaac, Christian NBA player and author of the new book, Why I Stand. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Man, thank you so much for having me. To all of you guys, I'm excited to talk with you.
Well, hopefully it'll be informative and fun. That's the way we usually roll. So obviously, everyone knows the story. It's not many things that can take an NBA player, which is a star, regardless of where they are, but a lottery pick and become a bigger star than that profession. And you had a story that that went international, and most people know it. But before we get into those specifics, obviously you have a book coming out. And generally, when we talk to authors, I start off by simply saying, "Why'd you write the book?" But I read the book, and in it, it's funny because there are things that you go into nice, wonderful detail, and things is just in there and it was almost like a one line. And then one day, Doc came and said, "Hey, great news! You're going to have a book." So I think we should start off by you expounding on that a little bit more, as opposed to just the book just came. So what was the how did the book come to you, the offer, and what was that journey like?
So when you say people know the story of standing, they know the story of not taking the vaccine, all that stuff, but they don't know the story of Jonathan Isaac. And that is really where the book was birthed from. So in the story, like you read, I was already left the bubble. I had tore my ACL, I had surgery, and then I was just home, and I was getting a bunch of letters and encouragement from all these different people. And my pastor, who is Doc, comes, running through my house, and he's excited. He's like, "You are going to write a book, and it's going to be turned into a movie," all this stuff. And he's dancing around. And I'm like, "A book? Like, I have no idea where to even start with a book." And what he said was, people know your stand, but they don't know your story. And throughout the process of writing the book, I'm like, man, it really is the story that gives the stand its backbone. And so I've just been excited, and it was perfect because as soon as, I would say, a few days later from him coming over to my place, I get a call from my agent, and he's like, this book agent called me and said that she wants to represent you and you should write a book. And he was unsure about it. He was like, he didn't even see a market for a book. And so now every time, we hit these different lists and all this stuff, I'm rubbing it in his face. We became a national.
What happened today? Yeah, go ahead and put that out. National bestseller.
We became a national bestseller today. We hit the Wall Street Journal, the USA Today, and the publishers, something. So yeah, just exciting stuff. And then we got connected with her. We started the process of writing the book, and then it was tough to find a publisher. We were going all over the place, and kind of the Daily Wire was the last stop. And didn't know they loved this story and loved what we could make, and they brought it to life.
Wow. So the background you talk about, they don't know your story. Your story is, everybody has a story, right? Every person has a story. It's all interesting, but then you get some different nuances and unique pieces. And it could be a story of any other kid, right? And what I found interesting about your background, and I think it ties into what happened down the road, the standing, the NBA, the going back, finding your way back to church, but talking about your family when you're growing up in the Bronx, and before you got to Florida, talking about your father and the relationship you had and how close he was, and that family unit, and up until the time you moved to Florida. Talk about how important that was to your life early on.
Yeah, my dad was everything. Like I literally thought he was Superman. I promise you. Every time I saw him picking me up from school, I would run and jump on him. And, he was so strong. He would do push-ups with me on his back. And I always just felt like I was more special to him than all of his other kids. And so, I just loved him. He was, you see in the book, he was big on integrity. He was big on character. He had us in church. It felt like every single day. He had us memorize whole Psalms and all that stuff. And, I guess my world really started to kind of just flip upside down when my parents split up. And I moved from Bronx, New York to Naples, Florida. But, I'm glad that we've been able to reconnect. And the story tells that, the book tells that story as well, about how me and him were able to reconnect and, rekindle our relationship.
Shamika, you always talk about how important that is. You made that important comment at the conference at Clarence Thomas and other about seeing men step forward because as of late they had been taking a back seat. So talk about the importance of that, and also the how it's important, and people aren't talking about. They make it seem like these women, these single mothers, are strong, which they can be, but they kind of eliminate what men can bring to the table. And John, I'm sure Jonathan can talk about how in Florida, that early time, the first few months, the first year, how it was difficult because that's what he was used to, and Superman is gone. So you focus on that a lot. So talk a bit about that importance and how you think that should be out there more and people should focus on that.
I definitely think it should be out there more. And just hearing that story of him talk about how his father is Superman, Jonathan, hearing you say that is like, that's the stories that we need to hear more of. I think so that men can understand how important their roles are as fathers, and they can know that they are needed. It's so often men are demonized for being masculine and just for being men. And I think it makes some men feel like, if I'm not needed, if I'm not wanted, what's the point? And they throw up their hands and, walk away. But I think that hearing you say that will encourage more people to stand up and actually say, I love seeing my father too. I love being around my father. And I think it's just a message that needs to get out, and it needs to be heard a lot more. I will say this before we go on. I'm devastated reading in your book that you are married. I have a 26-year-old daughter that I was trying to marry off. And I found out that, there was no chance.
Come on, this is stop. This is cut the bull. We got to keep it real out there. Tell Jonathan how you found out that he was married.
You told me.
I was ahead of her in the book, and I'm like, because she was like, oh man, got Jonathan coming. He's a good guy. He has morals and he stands on principle. This is wonderful. I got some daughters to marry out. So I'm reading the book, and I send her an email. I'm like, I don't know if you still gonna. So I sent her an email. I said, well, he's married now. She said, well, I'm not available.
Yeah,
Right.
I was going to say, I'm not sure she was just all about marrying off the daughters.
I am trying to marry them off, especially to the young men,
Uh-huh. But you made it here anyway.
I pushed through, despite the fact he had a wife and I couldn't, set him up with my oldest.
Y'all are hilarious. I appreciate that. But and even just to your point, even what I love about the book too is that even during the time that my dad wasn't in the picture, there were other men that stepped up. And so you have Coach Gates that took a huge interest in me and saw greatness in me when I didn't see it in myself. You had Ron and Bora and all of these people that weren't my dad, but cared about me and saw the potential in me and tried their best to get it out. And then ultimately meeting Doc later in my life. And so men are obviously important. And I think the book really shines a light on that.
Yeah, I hope people don't ignore that. I was going to mention that too, because I think that it kind of shown big in the book, but it was so done so subtly, it could be lost on some people to notice that Ron was getting up at 5:30 in the morning, driving you and waiting for you and bringing you back, right? And obviously Doc is all throughout the book, but Coach Gates had tremendous influence on you. So there were other people there, and like I say, people don't look. I mean, because they would focus. Most people would tell these stories and focus on mom, right? Because mom, you talked about how hard she worked and she had to work more than one job and all that, and that's all they would see. I mean, it's tremendous, but that's all they would see, and they wouldn't see how these other men help guide you. And I think that's important. Hopefully, people will pick that up. Will, what would you like to add?
Yeah, I mean, so the masculinity thing, I think the most interesting thing there is not just obviously having a dad at home is key. But I mean, in terms of what Jonathan just said, that experience of secondary male figures, I mean, I think I myself and many of the people I know have had that experience. Like my father wasn't around. I had slightly less basketball potential, I'm about 5'9". But I mean, I think of the little bit less. But I mean, I think of the coaches, Coach Pencil, Coach Panka, Coach Jackson. I still remember the names. And this is men of all races, ages, and so on that were there in those help out roles. And that kept a lot of guys, coming from, on the south side of Chicago or the east side of Aurora away from, frankly, the streets, and motivated people to go on and be successful in life. But I guess my question, honestly, we've all read the book. And I mean, this is an all Black podcast full of people who are probably aware of Jonathan, but I'll just ask kind of the basic question that sets up the book. So, I mean, this is, Why I Stand. The whole thing is about you refusing to kneel, for example, during the national anthem about a year or two ago when the Black Lives Matter movement was in full swing and they were making these demands. I mean, people were being confronted in the street. So I'll just set it up. I guess the first question is, why did you stand? Why did you refuse to kneel? And the second, original stuff. And the second is, what was the reaction to that like in the league? I mean, behind kind of those locker room doors, how did people respond to that?
Well, so for me, what happened to George Floyd happened, as tragic as it was and as wrong as it was. What I tried my best to do was take a step back and think about, okay, what is the best way for me to respond as an individual in this moment in a way that could bring the most change? And so it wasn't something that I was even trying to do vocally. It was almost like the moment was thrust upon me in the bubble where it was like, what are you going to decide to do? And honestly, I couldn't think of a greater antidote or message towards changing the hearts of men other than the gospel. And, people in that moment felt like kneeling for the national anthem and putting on a t-shirt was going to be the answer. And I was saying pretty much, look, I see what you're saying. I see what happened to George Floyd, and not just racism, but all the things that plague the hearts of men in our society today. And I can't think of anything that can actually beat that other than the gospel. It's not going to be an organization. It's not going to be a movement. It's not going to be a party. It's not going to be a president. It's going to be the love of Jesus Christ being shown by us to other people. And so on both sides of the aisle, white people loving Black people and Black people loving white people, past their differences, past their faults, past their history, in the same way that God loves us. So that's what I had decided to take a step back and say to myself, and even talking to my pastor all throughout the book about, what was going to be the decision to be had. And the night before, I was talking to him and saying, I don't think you understand how big this is going to be. Because I know walking into the bubble, this is what everybody's feeling. I had the team meeting the day before I stood, and they were like, we don't have a choice. This is something that we have to do. We have to kneel in this bubble. We can't be the only team not to. And then one player turns towards me and says, what are you going to do? And I'm like, y'all, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to kneel, and I'm not putting that t-shirt on. And then everybody goes crazy. And so I'm like, I know what this is going to be like. I know I'm going to get the coon. I'm going to get the Uncle Tom. I'm going to get the sellout. It's coming. I know that, people are going to try to make everything about, he's standing for the flag and standing for the national anthem, all that stuff. So I knew it was going to be tough, and it was tough, going through the book and having that, conversation with my teammates afterwards, having to deal with the media. It wasn't easy, but, I do it again, and I'm glad that, I just through the book, I've been able to continue to get my message out.
One follow-up to that, I have to ask, I mean, again, having experienced at a lower level that athletic culture, and people have a lot of focuses early on in life. It's a young league. How many people are genuinely like hard body BLM activists? And I mean, like, I don't mean to make fun of it, but as opposed to girls, like, how many people kind of secretly agreed with you? How many people were really on the activist train? How did most players react to this whole issue?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely were a few guys who were down, like going to the protests, going to the rallies, all these different things. But I would say the majority of guys were just going along with it, because of the pressure, because Black Lives Matter, they do matter. And so you just going along with the phrase is just going along with the phrase. But a big thing for me too was like, they made it as if that was the only way to support Black lives in the moment. It was like, we have the moral high ground because of what happened to George Floyd. So now we have authority and the right to force everyone to do exactly what we want them to do. And this is the only way to go about it. The only way that you can not be racist is to pledge your allegiance to the Black Lives Matter movement organization. And so I disagree with that as well. I disagree with the overall tone of the organization and everything that was going on, and just wanted to kind of, reiterate that Christ first message. But yeah, I think the majority of guys were just like, let's just get through this and kind of get it over with and go through it. But there definitely were guys who were like, no, I'm BLM all the way.
The one thing, last comment, but the one thing that kind of prompted this for me, like, obviously, the second largest group in the NBA after Black Americans, probably Eastern Europeans. And a couple of days ago, I saw a picture of like Luka Doncic wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt. And I'm sure that he cares to some extent about the movement, but it also struck me as like, you want to get along with the team, you put one of them on, you take the picture, and then you move on with your life. Whereas you seem a little more focused on, what could we actually do to change some of these issues, which is pleasant. So
Yeah, and I think, I mean, even take Luka Doncic, like I would say at face value he cares, again, because it says Black Lives Matter, it's not something that you can disagree with. And so it's like, but at the same time, putting on that T-shirt, you are affirming their stance, their organization, all those other things that come behind it, that come behind this kind of phrase Black Lives Matter that everybody, most people on the planet would agree with.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, how do they differentiate between the fact that yes, Black Lives Matter, but you have this organization that just outright pretty much said they were trying to dismantle the nuclear family and that they wanted to push trans this and trans that. And it didn't really seem like they were supporters of straight Black men unless they were dead. So I find it kind of strange when I see, especially Black men pushing that and being so hardcore supportive, knowing what their mission statement was. Like, did they make the difference in just, or did they know?
Jonathan?
I didn't get the question on that one.
She was wondering if they knew the difference between the organization and the things the organization actually stood for, like dismantling the nuclear.
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody really knew. I think because it was leading with Black Lives Matter, and this is something that everyone agrees with, and everybody can kind of jump on that train. There was no need to even care about what the organization was about. It was just about, this is what's happening, let's bring awareness to it. And again, it wasn't that they were bringing awareness to something that was ultimately wrong, or they were wrong in caring about what happened and all those things. Again, for me, it was just that I didn't see an organization as the answer, or going for a movement as the answer, or the tone of anger and resentment and bitterness as the answer. Because to me, anger is only going to beget anger, and hate is only going to beget hate, and we're going to continue this cycle that has been going on forever. And so pretty much for me, it was like, if we could choose to love people the way that God loves us, which is in spite of our sin, in spite of our faults, then we could really have change. But again, I think for me, it's like experiencing it will help you be able to do it. And so a big thing for me in the book was like, I had to experience what the love of God was like, where it was like, God loves me for me in spite of my faults. So that makes me want to love people in spite of theirs. And so I think that moment was, it could have been a moment, and hopefully as we continue to go down the path of talking about the book and promoting it, but that moment could have been a moment for real change and real love shown on both sides, to move us forward.
Well, I think I have the logical follow-up to Will's question. So, I mean, you clearly aren't the type of man, you have an ability that I may not have, because I can get, especially when it comes to BLM. But so it's not necessarily the in your face got you, but just logically speaking, now you're 2 years removed from it. And so seen nationally the results of defund the police, pull back, we don't want police, take the sex security out of schools, because BLM pushed for no security guards or police officers in schools. We saw what's happened in big cities since then. And in the last 3 to 5 months, the scandal surrounding the finances of the organization. So now 2 years removed from that, having a clearer lens to this stuff. Another two-part question. Do you think that I don't expect them to be vocal, but do you think some of those people who were on the fence, kind of like, people who would say things like, well, I support BLM, I don't support the organization, but BLM means this, you said they didn't know. Do they have a better understanding of what the organization is? And do some of them see now that that was not the way to affect the change that they wanted to affect?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think that's a fairly easy question, especially with all the things that you're talking about that have come out. And I think that is terrible. I think that is tragic. I think that there are a lot of people who regret it. There are a lot of people who are looking out and saying, man, I really was writing for this to be the thing, or it was promoted as the thing that could really change the country and all those different things. But to see the things that are coming out, for me, it again reiterates that, salvation is not going to come through an organization. It's not going to come through a person. It's ultimately going to come through hearts being changed by the gospel. And so to me, I'm not going to say I'm surprised, but, it just continues to kind of give me a purpose to continue on with my message.
Is the league still doing the paint it everywhere, put it on everywhere, drape it on everything kind of stuff? Or is it a little more toned down?
I think it's definitely a little more toned down, and we'll probably see it, toned down more as the seasons go on, in spite of anything, more tragic happening. But they've definitely toned it down a bit.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that comes up with that, like, as one of the players and as someone who's obviously also involved in making business moves, publishing a book, that kind of thing, what was the sort of business reaction to the extent that to the league doing this? I mean, like at the point when people were writing, equality on the court and rainbow letters and this kind of thing, I mean, what did the fans respond to that? I mean, were most people positive? Did fewer people come to games, or is that difficult to measure? Or
they had the bubble at first, remember? So nobody.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's another thing, actually. So the question. Yeah, so the question's kind of irrelevant. Good point, Charles, actually. But yeah, I mean, that's another thing. This was all going on during COVID. Right. I mean, if you want to talk about panic, I had actually forgotten about this. I watched some of the games in the bubble. But not only was there this frenzy about race relations, I mean, all the athletes were locked in. Where was it, Orlando?
Yep, Disney here in Orlando.
Yeah, all the athletes were in Disney World because the idea was that if you came in contact with the COVID virus, you might die. But a shorter version of the question, I mean, what was the public reaction to the BLM stuff? Did it have any impact? Did people just keep cheering for their team? Were you hearing about it from fans?
Not from fans. It's probably harder to measure from a player perspective, but I've definitely heard things about, people saying they're not going to watch anymore, or that the league took a hit in viewership and all that. And to that, I just feel like when it comes to entertainment spaces like the NBA, to me, it would only be the most beneficial to be in the middle and to allow people who are on a spectrum of beliefs and understandings to all enjoy the entertainment of your sport. But I think when it comes to the way it was promoted and all those things, it's because one side is obviously deemed as evil, and it becomes a moral argument to where they can cater to one side and uplift one side because that side is seen as right and morally correct to take the vaccine. For example, if you took it, you were a good person and everybody cheered you on. But if you didn't, or if you had any hesitancy, you were an evil person who didn't care about anybody. And so a lot of these conversations are shaped around a moral argument. And so it's easy for them to justify themselves in catering to one side and not caring about the other. But if I was running a business, I would see it on a spectrum and try my best to stay in the middle.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, that's a famous quote from your business. I mean, Michael Jordan, the all-time OG, Republicans buy sneakers too.
Right.
So, I mean, there are many issues, abortion, for example, where I'm sure everyone on this panel has a fairly passionate opinion, but where you don't really want to see the athletes for the NBA or the NFL running around in jerseys that say like choose life or a woman's choice or whatever. I mean, so like it kind of last thing about this, when you look at the jerseys that said like equality, racism, all that stuff, could you guys say anything that you wanted to when you talk about representing for one side? Could you pick choose life for a jersey, or was there?
No, you couldn't. They were pre-approved things that you could choose from, or you could
I've heard that, but I was curious.
Just have your last name. And to that point further, to me, it would be like to empower the players to use their own platforms to share what it is that they feel is right on a given situation. But again, the league as a whole to stay, as much out of, personal beliefs as they possibly could and give room to the players to speak their own truths.
I'd be rocking my free Taiwan shits. I mean, like there are a bunch of things we all know you can't.
Oh, that was not allowed.
All right.
He did nope, none of that.
Is the NBA sold out to China, to the CCP?
Oh,
he can't. He does still want to play. In the NBA.
I just thought I'd put it out there.
But I'm not going to tell the man what he can say. Do you want to tell us whether they sold out to China or not?
Well, I mean, look, I would say on the baseline, I don't know enough about the way that all of that works to give a real, adequate answer on. That's kind of been my position on it all. But I think simply like if you would want something to be a certain way over here in terms of America and freedoms and all those certain things, then to me, it would only be, right and justifiable to want that to be correct in the way that you do business. And so, if it was me, I may do it in a different way, but the NBA is free to do what they want to do.
Well, you mentioned COVID. Obviously, that's a great segue. You think the standing was hard enough, then you fell into that whole deal too. But before we get to your specific thing with COVID, that's another thing. I want to go to ask the similar question that Will asked on BLM, but from a COVID standpoint. Now, I know this was easier. BLM was kind of touchy and emotional, but there's got to be a lot of players that didn't voice their opinion, but even took the vaccine that didn't want to. It was like, oh, I want to play. I don't want to lose my thing. But there had to be players in that locker room, in their circles, just saying, this is heavy-handed and BS. Just like, so, and the funny part though is they didn't notice that the BLM thing was bullying, whether they agree with it or not. You were telling all the players, the white players, the black players, the veterans, you're telling everybody, put on this t-shirt and take a knee, but I don't want to. And everybody in my family was in the military and I love the flag. And I go to reenactments of World War II, right? And you say, shut up and put it on. And then they didn't understand that that was bullying, but I'm sure they understood that the COVID vaccination was bullying.
Yeah, I had plenty of conversations all year with guys being frustrated, with guys being fed up about the way that things were going on. And I've had conversations with guys say, yo, I respect you. You know what I'm saying? I didn't want to take it, but because of the way that everything was going, I just did. But if I had to do it again, I wouldn't. And so that's definitely been a sentiment. I'm sure that's been shared across the entire league.
But well, here's an interesting thing too. I know you do a great job of not mentioning names. You just say a teammate, a player, but it's not really to call people out, but I just want to know your reaction to this because it was so odd. Do you remember, did you even see it? So obviously, you know about Kyrie Irving's whole situation.
Right.
I'm here in New York where he could play, even when they lightened things, he could play on the road, but he couldn't play at home. It was so weird.
Right.
But there was times in the heat of that where your NBA commentators and your ESPN people were just like, he's not only blasting him, but they were blasting his teammates for not calling him out. I just saw an article today saying there's no way the Nets should offer him a contract. No way do you work with him after this, right? So what was your, or other players you talked to, their response to, even if they took the vaccine and they thought it was the right thing to do, watching big name retired players and ESPN anchors saying Kyrie Irving is selfish, Kyrie Irving is killing people, Kyrie Irving is bad. And by the way, Kevin Durant, you're bad too for not punching him in the mouth.
Yeah, I think it just shows how crazy everything is. It's like if you sit down and listen to Kyrie's position, whether you agree with it or not, you can take a step back and say, well, this guy's entitled to his own opinion, and that should just be it. But they have a job to do and they try their best to to do it, and their job is to create controversy and drum it up and make things as lively as they can. But it's terrible.
Yeah. Shamika?
I have a question. So are you aware of any players that really didn't want to take it, but didn't have the guts to like publicly stand against it? And so they
I'm aware.
fake vaccines.
Oh, you said fake vaccine?
Fake cards.
No. I'm not. I haven't had any conversations like that, but I've had the other conversation where they were like, it's not something that I want to do, but at the same time, I don't want to go through all of the backlash, so I'm just going to take it.
Right.
To be honest, I know a bunch of young professionals that got the fake vaccine cards. I mean, those were like $12 on Etsy for a while. So I've heard. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there were some people behind the scenes with one of them. The one thing about this actually that's interesting in the NBA is that, I mean, these have to be some of the healthiest people in the world.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about the average age of the league is 22 or something like that. Everyone's a professional athlete. So I thought the NBA, of all the pro sports leagues that I'm familiar with, and I follow most of them, kind of went the most hard body in response to COVID. Where, I mean, as you guys reminded me, everyone was moved into this one sector. That was the playoffs all took place there, right?
Yeah,
it was its whole little world. You had big face coffee and all this kind of thing, and I mean that went on for a period of weeks. Yeah, I don't really know. There's necessarily
that was the one of the big things for me where it's like, yo, I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm looking at everything that you guys are saying. There's a 99.97 survival rate. I don't have any comorbidities, and also I already had COVID. So I've heard about natural immunity. As much as they tried to kind of squander it out and not let anybody talk about it, I heard about natural immunity. I had several conversations with doctors, and they were like, honestly, the choice is just up to you. It's not something you necessarily need. And then seeing people's religious and medical exemptions be denied, people losing their jobs, I'm like, I could just go and take the vaccine. That's fine. But I want to be able to stand up and support the people who don't have a voice and don't have a platform in a similar way that Kyrie was saying that he wanted to. So to me, it was honestly an easy decision. And then on top of that, you throw in, okay, if I take this vaccine, I'm still opening myself up to getting the virus and transmitting it. And, during the entire season, I didn't get COVID. My entire team got COVID. Like some guys got COVID several times and I'm just there unvaccinated and everybody else is vaccinated and getting COVID.
But well, here's another thing too, a sidebar, but it's important because we talked about this a lot when it came up, but we're in different stages. I'm in New York, so I was in, COVID's going to kill, everybody's going to be dead Tuesday. Will was in kind of open up and Shamika was somewhere in the middle. And so you're in a state kind of like Will. So you've seen it, you travel in different circles, younger, NBA star. You were there, you were in a bubble, you were floating around Florida after that. At some point, all this arguing on social media and people calling each other name and saying you're a grandmother killer has to end when time goes by and all those evil racist right-wing nut jobs are still here. So right. People in Florida didn't die. I mean, it's not like you and everybody in your circle were dropping dead, vaccinated or not.
Right.
The argument was that we all needed to do it, slow the spread. If you don't do it, you might not get sick, you're healthy, but all these other people are gonna get sick, but we just didn't see it, right? So what was you were in Florida, it was mostly open. I mean, obviously your governor made national news about the way he covered it, handled it. So what did you see on the ground in the last 2 years as it relates to COVID?
Well, I saw the craziness at first, but over time, it's just gotten lighter and lighter, and people, I guess, have recognized over time that like this thing is something that I need to be extremely terrified of, especially in Florida. So at Florida, we was walking around, no mask, don't care. I probably was the leading against not wearing a mask, but I wore it when I needed to. But yeah, it's just something that I think over time people have gotten, open their eyes and just be like, you know what, this is something that we're just going to live with. It is what it is. And to your point about, not everybody dropping dead, like it was, so much of it was fear. So much of it was pushing people to be so afraid about everything that was going on. And the people who are walking around today, it's like, it is what it is. And so I think that we just continue to learn how to live with it and go from there.
So what was it like experiencing the madness of partisanship up front when you're not even political? You're not political. Nothing in the book was political. I think you didn't say anything to the end. You just talked, but you were more like I didn't even know your position. You were just saying some people felt this and some people felt this. You didn't say which people you were. Nothing political. But that Rolling Stone article, that interview.
Before you even said that, that's exactly where I was about to go with it. Because I'm like, when you talk about partisan, it was like that's really the thing that opened up my eyes. Because again, well, you didn't say it, but I'm not a political guy. I really haven't been. I've learned about politics now here in the, last year and a half or so. But it's like, I go into the Rolling Stone article, as wide-eyed and as, not knowing exactly what's going on. And this guy is great. Like, we have a great conversation. Like, he's like, yo, I agree with you. Like everything that I'm saying. And I'm like,
Jonathan, look, he's
exactly
pulling you in.
And so I get off the phone. I'm like, yo, that was great. Like, this is going to be a great article. And then I don't hear from him. And next, the article drops and I don't even know that it drops. I just start getting added on Twitter and like, you are an idiot. You're stupid. And I'm like, yo, where is this coming from? And so I see that it drops Jonathan Isaac's comments in the Rolling Stone article. And I'm reading it like, what the heck is this? And, he said, I came to my position by researching Black history and watching Donald Trump press conferences. And then I waited for people to die and put my trust in God. And I was like, oh my gosh. And
even
so
the headline though, do you remember what the headline was crazy?
NBA's anti-vaxxers are pushing around the league and it's working.
Bullying the league. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah. And so the first thing I did, I called my pastor. I was like, yo, I look stupid. Like, you don't understand. Like, I look crazy in this. And my phone is just going off on Twitter. But the perfect thing was that we had media day the next day. And so he was like, yo, like, they ask you questions about it, share, so it was able to, and then the video goes viral. It has like 8 million views in a week. And I'm like, I feel better because now like everybody gets to hear my position. But it was the same stuff that I mentioned to the guy on the phone, but just that was my first kind of waking up to agenda and there being a bias. And again, pushing me to the point where I'm like, yeah, I'm really not about this, because it's not about the vaccine. It's not about saving lives. It's about protecting, your side.
And that's interesting. So before that, you probably, I mean, because until it hits you, how do you know you're not paying attention to this type of stuff? You didn't realize, you probably had heard some things way out on the periphery about people saying the news is skewed, or people will do this and spin your words. But to see it for the first time and it's you, and you just looking at that, that had to basically change your whole outlook on the way you have to kind of look at news as it comes in differently now, right?
Exactly, 100%. I got a little taste of it obviously around standing and
Right.
the Black Lives Matter and all that stuff, but nothing like what happened with the vaccine. That was definitely like the eye-opener moment for me, and where I was like, okay, I'm gonna read every headline twice and not just go along with what everybody's saying. And I think to really understand what's going on, you really do have to do a great deal of research to really be in the know about what's right and what's wrong. Because if you go off of headlines, you're gonna be lost.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting about that is you actually mentioned two of the things that people often describe when they're talking about getting quote unquote red pilled. One is the idea that if anyone's saying anything that's at all rebellious or right wing or sometimes even pro-Black, like that's the dominant movement. So like the title of the article that you mentioned was "The NBA's Anti-Vaxxers Are Pushing the League Around." And that sounds just wildly unrealistic. I mean, there were teams that mandated the vaccine. The argument is that there should be no one that's opposed to the vaccine at all. That's the natural state of affairs.
Right.
And sort of thing two is just that reality of when you talk to what's often called the MSM, the mainstream media, you're often going to be misquoted in weird ways.
Right.
Enough people say that it's probably not a coincidence. You're going to be presented as an idiot. I once gave an hour-long interview as a favor to a major newspaper that I won't name. It's one of the two big guys, though. And at the end, they quoted me saying one thing, which is, "We should trust our leader, President Trump," which I did not say. And it was just like, bro, like I'm looking through this entire article. And it was the most ridiculous, like no talking to like the Daily Caller, small, like local African-American papers. I've never, ever had a similar experience. So it's just like realizing a lot of this stuff is straight up fake. A man on the street said most policemen are bigots. It's definitely a transition. The one, I guess, question as opposed to comment, didn't you already notice that or know that as an athlete, though? I mean, like, do you find that the media is honest on that front, like who's injured?
Yeah, but I would say not to this degree. Like, you learn as a basketball player coming up, and like, there's some reporters that, you don't want to talk to, some reporters that you do want to talk to. But I think for the most part, there is a general code, and the teams try their best to protect you and all that stuff. So you kind of have that. But that was the first one where it was like, yo, like, and then obviously it was for the world to see. And so it's much bigger than, your beat reporter for the Magic team.
And it might be different from this standpoint too, correct me if I'm wrong, in that if you got a guy who's just like, I just think I'm a sports writer, local guy, and I just think Jonathan's just not that good. I don't know why they hyping him up. I might be a mean person, but I go into it saying Jonathan sucks. So you know what I think. I don't try to chum up with you and say, let's go for a drink, Jonathan. We're buddies. Hey, dude, just off the record, man. We're cool. Just tell me this. And then just rip you in the paper the next day, right? This is this was targeted and intentional.
One of the things that surprised me too, like he knew I was unvaccinated. And I didn't tell him about it. I was like, and so, but I didn't put two and two together. Like even when the article came out, I was like the unvaccinated. I'm like, so they obviously know who is vaccinated and unvaccinated, and they're sharing this information and stuff like that.
All right, because the people who vaccinated, they're making them say, you know what I'm saying? It's not just like, we want you all to get vaccinated. Because I know even in my company, and NBA would be a lot stricter. They were like, here's a list. Check, even if you're not vaccinated, before they told you it wasn't okay, they load you in. But I said, we just want to know who is, and I just check it. So everybody's like, okay, I am, and I'm not. So they already know, even if you don't. Well, I didn't check a box, Charles. Yes, but everybody who vaccinated did check a box. So they actually, as I recall, to be fair, they sent out an email from my company saying, after a while, they got people encouraging people to get vaccinated. Then they just said, you got to this date, blah, blah, blah. If you don't reply to this email, we're just going to assume you're not vaccinated. So it don't matter. You could be vaccinated and boosted. If you didn't reply to this email, we're going to go around and tell everybody you're unvaccinated. That's how they do it. It's crazy.
They hit you with that peer pressure. Everybody knows you're the infected one.
Yeah. You're the one who's getting everybody in the bubble sick.
Right.
But we can't leave the interview without talking about two, I guess, I mean, we can't say more important because the book has the picture and the stand, but the bigger, overarching things in the book. And that's what some people may be surprised by, not the other one, but the anxiety and the fear, even throughout when you were young, you were like, well, I didn't really think I was that good. You see this player, he's 6'11", he's dominating, blocking shots, and he's the minister of defense. I mean, what does he mean that he has bad? I mean, everybody has bad days, but that he feels bad and he feels like he can't do it. So I think that's another layer that people will enjoy about the book. You being so, humbling yourself and being so open about that kind of thing. So talk a bit about that. Like, what was the episode you mentioned in the book in college?
Yeah, that was in college.
Was that the first time that had happened though?
Yeah, that was the first time that I had something where it was like an external like response to what was going on the inside. Everything else was just
fears.
I had asthma attacks a lot when I was younger. That may have been something, but it was deemed as asthma. And then
but you didn't even have asthma.
Exactly. So I got to college and that was so funny to me, but it was so like a jaw drop. And he was like, "You've never had asthma." And I was like, "Yo, is you crazy? I had asthma for so long." But yeah, I think what I love about the book is that me standing up and saying, "Yo, like I believe that Jesus Christ is the answer for the world's problems." And people can look at that as, "Oh, that's so cliche, that's so this and that." But what the book does is it shows you how he has been the answer for me and my life. And so when most people saw what happened, everybody said, "This guy's the most courageous guy in the world. This guy's so bold. Everybody be like Jonathan Isaac." And it's like, yo, you have no idea, who I am or where I've come from or what I've struggled with and what has taken place in my life to get me where I am today. And so you guys know from reading the book, but for me, where it really started was moving from Bronx, New York to Naples, Florida, where it was like going from that predominantly Black community to predominantly white community. And I struggled to fit in. And I have that one moment where I'm in the principal's office and he's really concerned about all the other kids' safety. And my mom is like, "Oh, he's just a kid. He's just coming from New York. He's just trying to fit in." And she's trying her best to plead with him. And he's like, "No, like this, this can't go on." And that was the first time like me, I took a step back as a kid and just really became like self-conscious and self-aware and was like, I'm not the way that I see myself, and everybody else sees me as a monster that may be what I am. And so that's when I started to develop anxiety and just fear of being around people and always wanting to, cater my actions and my demeanor towards getting people to like me. And so that's when I found basketball, and basketball brought me everything that I wanted at the time. The girls started to like me because of ball. The guys wanted to be around me because of ball. And so it was easy to find all of my self-worth in the game. And that's why it was so hard to balance, because if I played bad, I hated myself. And I was a bad player, making me a bad person. And if I played great, everybody loved me. And that was that. And so for me, what really helped me to breathe for the first time was encountering the love of Christ, where it was like, yo, God loves me for me. I'm okay. Like, I don't have to get everything right. I don't have to make every shot. And the people who love me conditionally aren't the ones that are important. What's important are God who loves me unconditionally and the people that he's brought into my life that love me unconditionally, i.e. my wife, my church family, Doc, that really was the one that kind of showed me what it was to love like Christ. And so it's like putting on display what the love of Christ is like, and then offering that as a message to us really changing the world.
Anything to add, Shamika?
No, I was just going to say Royce White told me to tell you hello, and he is going to start a podcast, and he would like for you to come on when he does.
Okay. All right, cool.
Don't be doing advertisements in the middle of the show for
other shows.
If you didn't like this interview, Jonathan, we can find you other people who can interview you better. What the?
We could just keep it going. Like, well, I am fearless.
I gotta give a plug for my friend.
That's hilarious. But you should do his podcast though. But I guess the second piece you led to it talking about Doc is we have to talk about your faith journey and how you became this new the next generation of Christian apologists, right? You started voraciously reading all this stuff, and it was interesting how you described it. Obviously, talking about your father having you in church every day, like you said before, moved there, and then your mom kind of eventually said, "Go to church because it'll give you some grounding and something that that you can pull from New York." But then in the NBA, from the chapel, right? You went from the chapel to meeting Doc to that one church, and then, eventually to speaking, and traveling and all that kind of stuff. So talk about that progression and how that happened.
Yeah. And just, even going back to the stand a little bit, like the stand being like this one big courageous moment, it's like I had all these little moments of courage and facing my fear and trusting God at his word that helped lead me to that moment. And so that all starts with meeting Doc on an elevator. And so first I go to chapel, and the guy's like, Luke 6:46, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I say? And I'm like, yo, like, that's me. I'm out here doing my thing. And I could care less, what Jesus has to say about anything. I really want to experience everything that the world has to offer, and I get to, and I start to see that it's not fulfilling and it's empty. And then around that time that I hear that verse, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to figure out if this thing is really real. I'm going to go on my Christian apologetics tip. And I was really in there. Like, I was watching all the videos. I even signed up for a course. I think it was like Biola University or something like that. I signed up for a course and was reading all this stuff about Christian apologetics, but it didn't get me all the way there. So it was logical in my mind, but it wasn't tangible like in my life. And so that came through Doc. So it was like God was getting me there. Like I was right at the cliff when it came to the knowledge and learning all these different arguments, the Kalam cosmological argument, all this different stuff. But I fell off the cliff when I really met love. And so I meet Doc on the elevator. He says, I can tell you how to be great. I'm like, great. I'm the number 6 pick in the draft. But he's like, great. And he said, how? I asked him how, like, you got to know Jesus. And from that point on, it's just the story just takes you all over the place. And I really feel like it was just God revealing himself to me and ordering my footsteps, Doc's footsteps for me to actually get it. And that moment where we did the feeding thing at the church, and I get back home and I'm on the side of my bed and I'm like, yo, like, all of this could not have happened if it wasn't orchestrated. There's no way. And I'm like, okay, so if it's orchestrated, that means someone cares about me. And that was the thing that like had me to take a step back again, because I was so used to working for everything, working for the love of my family, not because they're bad people, but because it was just something that I was dealing with on my own. And I didn't really have any outlet to get it out. And so it was like, man, like God is looking for me. God is looking out for me and searching for me. And that was the start of me saying, you know what, I'm going to give my life to him. And, I don't have a regret looking back and now having a book and being married and just seeing how, God has really transformed my life. And I'm just thankful to everybody that he's brought in it. Doc, I couldn't thank enough. I know he's like the angel of the book, and my church family and my wife as well.
Well, I have one other question, but I wanted to see if Will had anything he wanted to say, or Shamika.
No, not really.
Well, I think you might have some comments on my last question here.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you this. I already set the stage of you not being political, so I know that's not the case. But the book is great. It's uplifting. You're honest. Like I said, you talked about anxiety. You talked about your struggles and this. You talk about your faith. There's some basketball stuff in there. Everything you want in the book. Why is it that you mentioned the positive at the beginning, bestseller, everything's going great. Yet I'm watching some interviews. You're doing a lot of press for this. But thank you for coming here, by the way. But I'm looking at all the stuff and like all the people that are interviewing you, they're really nice to you and they're talking about how great the book is, but they have a common theme. They all either tend to be political, or they tend to be, as Will said, red-pilled, or they tend to be very logical, open, non-political people. But where's the Black community? Where's the liberal people? Where's MSNBC? Where's
You're not going to get the liberal people.
Where's the why?
I ain't got no love. I haven't gotten much love, man.
Yeah, have you noticed? And did that strike you as odd? Because it's a feel-good book.
So look, it's definitely something that I've noticed, of course. I wouldn't say that it strike me as odd, especially coming off of, learning a little bit about the way our world works with COVID and everything. But, for me, I would just hope that people, even over time, but just could have seen the sincerity in my position and sincerity of why I believe what I believe and are open to having a conversation about it. But I think, again, it just speaks to how divided we are, how political everything has gotten, and how much it's about, protecting your side and protecting your arguments, and not about, bridging the gap and ultimately the world getting better as people would claim. And so yeah, I think it just sucks. I think it's a tragedy. that we don't have more conversations over these topics, and it is just, one mindset, one way, and everybody goes in their separate way, and that's it. But I wish it was different.
Will, what do you got to say
Yeah,
about
actually,
that?
I do have one quick comment on that. Actually, Charles was right. I mean, this is not unusual, and I'm curious if any of you guys have any kind of solutions here. But I mean, what Jonathan's describing is, I mean, pretty much what you're going to see with a lot of projects that are somehow linked with any conservative idea.
Yeah, and not even
that's what I'm saying, though. It's weird because this is a sports star writing a book about Jesus. Like, there's nothing inherently one-sided about this, but you very often see this pattern. Like, one of my books is about hate crime hoaxes, and it turned out like a third of the hoaxes were from kind of the white political right. There's not that much of a point to it, but because of the publisher that it came out with, I did some black media. But when I talked to MSNBC and so on, I was very frankly told, like, the only way we would have you guys on is as like the villain in the upper right hand square. So that is a problem. Any ideas, Jonathan or the panel, on how to get past it?
Man, I wanted to say this real quick. Like, even when it came to finding a publisher, it was tough. Like, I'm like it was tough. Like, we had meetings after meeting, and we had this one meeting with this big publisher. We had this.
Are you a white supremacist?
we had this one meeting with this big publisher, and yeah, I'm talking to him. I'm sharing my heart about the book and all that stuff, and we get to the BLM stuff, and like they look like you didn't kneel, like this, that, and the third. I'm like no, and then could you explain that and all that stuff? I was like, well, let's say that you did something, right? Because we all do something, right? We all sin and fall short of glory of God. I said, let's say that you did something, and there was two people. I said, let's say that you did something, and this other person found out about it. Like, how would you want them to handle you in that moment or in that situation? Would you want them to show you grace and mercy, and you still obviously be held to what you did, but show you grace in the process? Or would you want them to damn you to hell and tell you that you're evil and all this different stuff? And they were like, well, obviously I want them to handle me with grace and mercy. I'm like, well, that's all I'm saying. I think that's a part of the conversation as well. But no, they ended up passing on the book, but it was a little bit ironic that the Daily Wire wanted it, and it's doing so well in that space. But yeah, it was tough. It was really tough.
Well, I hope that some of them will have you on. I should reach out to, like he said, the ones that had me on all attacked me, but I would love to see you on there, because I think it'd be hard to attack you, right? I mean, what can they attack you on, right? You haven't said anything that, I mean, maybe the COVID stuff, maybe they'll attack you on COVID, but the BLM
It would
thing,
probably go into the Daily Wire. Why are you platforming Nazis?
True.
I mean, it would be
right.
Oh, yes,
totally focused on it would have nothing to do with the book. No
oh,
one's
right,
going
the
to attack
blurbs.
Jesus.
This is blurbs. I mean, my God. I mean, they're going to be like Franklin Graham, Tim Tebow.
Tim Tebow, that's a good one. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Tim
He's a
Tebow.
good guy.
Franklin
Happens to be a
Graham.
Christian.
Ben Shapiro.
Ben Shapiro, yeah.
Right. That alone may get canceled from some other types of media, just because of the people who said positive things about the book and the shows you've been on. But yeah, I mean, you're doing a good job in selling the book, regardless of their help. So I don't think that's well, I don't know. I kind of want to try something, since Shamika was promoting everybody else's show, because I was like, I remember somewhere I was talking about Jonathan when this actually happened, and I went through my show, my old radio clips, and I didn't have it. It was because I was sitting in for someone, and I asked the question. Let me see if I can figure out how to do this. So when you took that stand, I was guest hosting on the Kevin Jackson show, and let me see if I can find it. Where is it?
Well, while you're looking for it, Charles,
What are you gonna do?
so that I can get back in you and Will's good graces. Slapped me. Oh gosh, what happened?
Go
Okay.
ahead. I'm
So
just showing you.
I brought up Royce because Jonathan was talking about anxiety. That was one of the things that Royce fought the NBA over, his anxiety issues. So that's why I brought it. Yes.
Okay. No. So this is what I asked.
I never stopped loving you myself.
Thank you.
Charles,
In fact,
Charles
he
was a
told you
little unfaithful. I mean, to the star of the show, I'm in your corner.
Well, the star can do whatever she wants. So I asked a question here on this episode of the Kevin Jackson show about, this was the day after you took the stand.
Oh, wow.
Who is the bigger hero? Colin Kaepernick or Jonathan Isaac? Colin Kaepernick, when he took a knee, was vilified by many, and for some, they called him a hero. But I do think it's interesting that how quickly we've gone from just Colin Kaepernick to one or two players taking a knee in the NFL to the start of this season when sports is brought back. And now it's news when you do stand for the anthem, which is why I bring up Jonathan Isaac. He's a player for the Orlando Magic. They had a game on Friday. The entire team came out in a unified front to wear Black Lives Matter t-shirts and take a knee during the anthem. And he was the sole player who not only stood, but did not wear the t-shirt. I think it's clear, whether you agree with him or disagree with him, that he is clearly the bigger hero. Because even when Colin Kaepernick was being vilified amongst his teammates, I'm sure most of them were either fine with it or didn't say anything. But here you have a black man in the time of Black Lives Matter who has to play and work and sit in the locker room with these other black men who all put on the shirt and all took a knee, and he took a different path from them.
So what's the answer to the question, Will?
What's the answer to the question of who's the biggest hero? Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, not only are we friendly with him, not only is he on the show, but I would say Jonathan for a couple of reasons. One, Jonathan was still in the league. I mean, like, one of the things people forget about the whole Colin Kaepernick thing, and I don't really have that much of a problem with this brother getting money, except for the social damage he's done. But one of the things people forget, I mean, Kaepernick, either the year before he did all this or the year of, I forget, not a fan of his team, but had been benched for Blaine Gabbert. I mean, his record was like 2-14 if you follow pro football the year before this. So when people say like Kaepernick gave up a starting Super Bowl QB slot, that's not really what happened. Like, Kaepernick gave up his position as the third QB, and he had some issues with the coach on that team, to sign a $100 million deal with Nike. Colin Kaepernick was the first dude to get a shoe deal other than Jay-Z, where the shoes didn't have anything to do with playing sports. I don't know how well you can protest or kneel in them or whatever, but I mean, Kaepernick has a contract that has him on billboards around the country. So, I mean, I think when you talk about what Jonathan's done and what some other players have done on the vaccine issue and so on, it's obviously a lot harder to have to still go back in the locker room, one, with an unpopular position, two. It's really easy to say something like white man bad during your last year and then collect a check. So I don't even hate on him. Colin Kaepernick also is like a fourth black, no hostility. I mean, look at me. But I mean, the presentation of Colin Kaepernick as a civil rights hero is kind of funny. That's all I'll say about that. So
well, and that's the key too. I think that he got paid for it and Jonathan didn't, right? Quick and simple. He did that.
So there's whoop drops.
Yeah, but nobody backed up $100 million truck, I don't think, to him and say, man, great job for standing. Here's $100 million.
$100 million is like national budget money, like start a record label money. That's a lot of money. Right. I mean, like, that's nuts.
Shamika, last word to you.
Well, I don't give my vote to Colin Kente and that
his name is Toby.
Blown out fake afro. I definitely would go with Jonathan as the bigger hero.
Right. So I think we're all in agreement here. We won't ask you because that would be fair, but thank you for coming on. Pick up the book, Why I Stand, Jonathan Isaac, NBA forward for the Orlando Magic. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. It's been great and fun talking to you all. So I appreciate it, and I'll stay up with you guys.
All right.
God bless the US of A, land of the free and a home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to say, cause I'm Patriot J and I'm saving a day.